Hello students, in this module we are going to start chapter 12 of your history, and that is the modern age in Europe Reformation. Basically it's a short chapter, so we will not be using much of your time in this particular chapter. We'll just try to finish it within two modules. So first we will do the introduction and the causes, and in the second module we will try to finish the Martin Luther and Counter Reformation along with the question answers. So without wasting any time in this chapter, let's quickly start with the introduction part and the causes. Now here I'll be reading it out for you and then I'll be explaining along with that. It is Reformation. The Reformation is the name given to a group of, you can say, religious movements which basically started somewhere around the 16th century. If you remember, in the previous chapter we have done Renaissance, that started from 14th century and lasted to somewhere around 17th century. This particular thing started somewhere around 16th century and then lasted even for a longer period of time, but we can say that this is basically an outcome, or you can say a repercussion, or an even can be termed as an as a consequence of the Renaissance, because Renaissance made way for Reformation. Renaissance was a new approach, new way of thinking, and that reformed the society. This reformed society is basically a product of Reformation, the movement that started during this time. And since it started in Europe, we can say Reformation was mainly focused on reforming the society, because the society till now was ruled, governed by the church, by the authority of Pope and so on. But now onwards, people starting having a modern approach. They were not totally be governed by the church, by the Pope, because Pope as well as the church got indulged into various activities which were like totally against the religion, which were not following the religion in a proper manner, and rather forcing on the religion on the people the way they want their people to follow, but not the real teachings of the religion. So here we see it was somewhere in the 16th century launched this movement Reformation. It was launched by the Christians against the various drawbacks of the church. There were certain points, loopholes, or you can say things that were bringing down the church authority down because of some corrupt people, some evil practices, and that is why people wanted to have a particular movement which could point out these important loopholes and try to rectify them and make them better for the society to have. So the main target of these movements was the Pope, because he is the highest authority and they considered him to be in the wrong. So these movements created a split in the church, and the church was like divided into two groups. One which remained, or which still continued to remain loyal to the Pope in the Rome, and they were known as the Roman Catholics, whereas the other group that was protesting against the authority and the evil doings of the Pope, they were the ones who started moving away from that particular authority of the church, and they were known as the Protestants, because they protested against the authority of the Pope and the church and the evil practices. So they were called as the Protestants. The Reformation broke out in a number of countries. You can say various countries were there, like England, France, Germany and so on, but everywhere it was with a different intensity. The degree of movement was different and the way it was conducted was different. So we can say the Protestants of one country totally differed in their thoughts and ways with the Protestants of the other country. So it is not just, we can say that it was one movement which started everywhere. That is why we said in the beginning, it was a group of religious movements which started into different parts. Collectively they are called as Reformation movements, but they were all protesting against some or the other evils of the church and the Pope, and that is what has been called as the group or the Protestants fighting for the better or rectification of the religion. Although these movements were organized by different people, and that too under different names, they are collectively called as Reformations because they were aiming at reforming the existing church. Reforming means once again having a new particular law of conduct or code of conduct for the church and the various authorities in the church, so that they can work better and work according to the religion and religious teachings, not according to the goodwill and according to the benefit of the Pope and the other designatories in the church. So here we see there were various causes for the Reformation. Now what are the causes of Reformation? First we will do point wise, we'll take up. First is dissatisfaction with the practice of the Catholic Church. Now, the Catholic Church during the early medieval period was headed by the Pope who resided in Rome. So here we can say during this time, during the 14th century, people became dissatisfied with most of the activities of the church and many of the practices which were which were practiced by the church. So this particular dissatisfaction led to the Reformation, and these church practices were as such. Here we take the sub points. First point is economic factors. The church had vast properties, huge number of land and things through which they could have got a huge ample amount of money. But besides this, they still took 1/10 of the salary of the people or the income of the people, and this 1/10 as a tax or as a religious duty is called as tithe. So they took money as in the form of tithe, which was like in a way compulsory. It is basically not compulsory for a person to give his tithe in the church, but it was forced. People were forced to give that particular tithe money to the church. In addition to this, their clergy also asked people to give another particular tax, and this particular tax was called as Peter's pence. So all this money was, they had property, they had income through their properties, then they were taking tithe also, then they were taking Peter's pence, and they were taking all the money from here. Plus, moreover, if that was not enough, Pope Leo X, he also issued a particular, you can say, letter, and they were called as pardon certificates or indulgences, and these were given to the people who could buy them. So because he wanted to make St. Peter's Church, so for that particular thing he started selling these indulgences. It was like a letter of giving pardon to the sinners. Whoever could buy an indulgence or a particular letter, certificate of forgiveness, pardon certificate, those particular people would be given as a letter by the Pope that they have been given, you can say, pardon from their sins from this life as well as from their afterlife, after death life. So basically, as per the religion, the power to pardon the sins is only in the hands of God. But here Pope started doing all those things. He started selling indulgences, that you buy the indulgence and you will be given forgiveness for your sins. And that was a particular step which many of the people criticized, because it annoyed the rulers as well as the common people, because obviously rulers' authority was totally like discarded, and moreover the common people, those who did not have money, they felt that it is indulgences or forgiveness is only for the rich people who could buy the forgiveness, whereas the common people will always remain a sinner because they cannot buy forgiveness. So that was something which was corrupt practice by the church, by the Catholic or by the Pope, we can say. So that is why they were totally against this particular way of indulgences and all these taxes that were taken by the church. Then next is corruption in the church. There were many pope and designatories, clergymen, those who were totally corrupt. They were not even properly educated, and they even neglected, they lived their life in luxury, and they neglected the religious duties that they are supposed to perform, they were ought to perform. And therefore even the priest promised salvation in exchange of fees, that if you give a certain amount of money or certain amount of fees, they will pray for you, they will sanctify you, they purify you, they will get you pray for you for your forgiveness of the sins. So it was like everything being bought from the Pope. They could pronounce a marriage lawful or unlawful. In fact, there were fees for every transaction of life from birth to death. For every particular thing, they were supposed to give a fee to the priest, to the Pope, to the church, and then only that particular proper rite would be followed. Whereas there are no particular fees for any of the church rites or activities. They are free for all the people. But here they were supposed to pay fees for everything, and that is why these practices were severely criticized by all, from rich to poor, from rulers to the common man. Then next is, importantly, we see rulers' resentment. Now here we have been seeing that it was not, most of the activities were not accepted or annoyed the rulers. They were criticized by the rulers. So here we see the proper point, that is resentment of the rulers, how they were angry with them, and that became a cause for the Reformation. Pope's authority became so high that he could overrule a king, he could pass over a judgment over the king's rule, and people had to follow that, and even king had to follow that, and that made king totally a puppet ruler, because he was supposed to do everything under the guidance, not over guidance, but we can say under the interference and total dictatorship of the Pope or the priest. So that is why Pope's interference in the political affairs was naturally opposed by the kings, and they strongly supported the movement of Reformation. They were totally against all the other things of the authority of the church, and they wanted to have their free rule away from on without any interference from the Pope. Here we can see some of the references given. Two of them are about the French king Philip IV, and he forced Pope Clement V to leave the headquarters and go away from his kingdom, whereas King Henry VIII, he of England, hardly cared about the Pope, and he got the church lands and in 1536 and passed an act for the dissolution of monasteries so that his power could be maintained, and he ruled over the entire thing and getting all the monasteries, the smaller monasteries, locked, closed, and totally removed from his kingship. So that is how most of the kings started taking steps against the church, and they now felt that it is moreover that they should be ruling their nation by themselves, and they totally turned against the church. And that is how church authority, the overall sovereignty or overall rule over the or dictatorship of the church, came to a downfall during this time of era, during this era of the Reformation movement. Next we have movements against the church. Because of the various malpractices of Pope, of the clergymen, and many of the people, those who were involved in the church activities, so because of them, many anti-church movements began in Europe and in the Middle Ages. These movements directed their attacks on the wrongdoings of the church. Remember always, the attacks or the protest or you can say any movement was not against the religion. It was against the church as the body of the Pope, the priest, and the clergymen, those who were in the evil practices. So the movement was against them, and therefore Wycliffe criticized the worldliness of the church. Worldliness of the church means these Pope, these church priests, they were supposed to prophesize and promote the teachings of the religion, whereas they had totally involved worldliness in the teachings in the church. They had involved themselves in the money and things, and that was something which Wycliffe said that was turning church into worldliness, whereas church should be kept away from all the worldly affairs. And that is why he opposed them, and he said he laid emphasis on the Bible as the sole guide for salvation. For salvation, you don't have to buy indulgences, you don't have to buy or give fee to the priest or pope for various activities. Salvation is free of cost. You just have to get back to the Bible, read it, understand it, and that is how you would be getting salvation. That is what Wycliffe said, and that was the reason why they were against the malpractices of the church or of the Pope and the post holders. Then we see about, besides all these important causes, one important cause was the Reformation, which can be termed as the immediate cause. We'll read over here. It is, there had been some cases of protests against the Pope and the church authorities earlier also, but during that time the church authority was quite strong, and therefore these protests were totally crushed with a strong hand. Now there was a particular priest, a German priest, Martin Luther. He took up this particular challenge that he is going to raise his voice against the church, against the authority of the Pope and the wrongdoings of the Pope and the clergymen and the church. So that is how he raised a strong voice and launched a movement against the church, abuses of the church and the authority of the Pope. This proved to be the immediate cause of the Reformation, and with this the entire movement of the Reformation started in Europe in the 16th century, and that is how we can say a new formation of a social pattern started coming into being. Next point, the second point. These were all the sub points of the first point. We can say the first point that we did, dissatisfaction with the practices of Catholic Church. Under that, these are the various points. Now, the second point is new learning. As we see that these people have just come from the out of the era of Renaissance. So we can say the impressions of Renaissance movement are still there, very much influencing the society. The spread of new learning, the spirit of inquiry, and everything that was done in the Renaissance period was totally was developing still in most of the scholars. Printing press and the printing of Bible in the vernacular languages even brought a new outlook among the people, among the common men, about the religion as well as what a church should be doing and what it really was doing, and that is especially the authority of Pope. So here we say people began to question everything, including the authority of the Pope. They criticized church practices, rituals, and the lifestyles of some of the clergymen also, that they are not living a life which a priest or priestly person should be doing, a godly person should be doing. And that is why they criticized all these things. And with this, we can say nobles and merchants were jealous of the wealth of the church. The common men in Europe looked upon the church taxes with contempt. They were not happy to give taxes because they felt that these taxes are futile, they are of no use. It is not a practice to be done, a thing to be done or practiced as per the rules and regulations of the church. And that is why they were not happy with this. And this changing attitude of people towards the church also led to the growth of a secular idea and ideology. And with this, we can say a total, you can say a particular setup was done for the Reformation movement. It was the foundation of the Reformation movement was kept in this way, and then gradually people started following the Reformation movement in their day-to-day life system, patterns, society, everywhere. And that is how Renaissance ultimately led to the starting of Reformation movement and practicing of the Reformation ideas in the society. That was we can say strongly it was an act against the church and the Pope's authority, the wrongdoings of the church and the authority of the Pope. So that is how we see about the introduction and causes of Reformation movement. In the next module, we will be taking up the contributions of Martin Luther as well as the counter Reformation, along with the discussion of question answers. So we will not take long with this chapter. We will try to finish it within 2 sessions. So I hope you've understood it so far. Go back to the books, go through the chapter, read them again when you listen to this particular explanation, or you can do it as at the same time. It will be easy for you to read, understand, and have a better understanding of the chapter. So with that thought notion, we'll end up this particular module.